Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, bacteria and germs alike, to the Court-Martail Podcast, the podcast made by Smarks, for Smarks, for the entertainment of Smarks, and all of the people out there on the interwebs. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, here to break down and review a pay-per-view, back when they actually were called pay-per-views, because I'm sure most of you who watch this show know that we have abandoned the modern wrestling scene. We have given up on modern wrestling, both AEW and WWE, so now it's time to put on those rose-tinted glasses and drink that hefty cup of nostalgia. Unforgiven 2002, the good, the bad, and the hot lesbian action all in one package. And to join me in reviewing this pay-per-view of old, the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He is the Deputy Wade to my Thomas Wachowski, Mr. Skylar Greenberg, the Bay Area Brawler himself. How you doing, my friend?
For context, I was 8 when this pay-per-view happened.
Yeah, well, I wasn't much older. I mean, I was 9. That's right, yeah, I was 9 when this pay-per-view happened, but I was still hella excited when this pay-per-view came on, because my grandmother actually taped it off on pay-per-view. She actually bought the pay-per-view and taped it for me to watch, and boy did I watch it. But it's one thing to watch it then versus now, where I can barely speak because my words are so jumbled, because there's definitely a lot to unpack on this. Your overall thoughts of the pay-per-view, Skylar?
I mean, that's the thing, is that we've abandoned the the modern pay-per-views, because I'm not watching WrestleMania Backlash.
Neither am I.
So maybe next month what we should do is watch a Backlash pay-per-view when they were good.
There's an idea. That's definitely an idea. We could definitely do that, even though it's in May. But you know what? Backlashes have happened at very strange times before.
I'll find one.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing, is that we're basically going to alternate pay-per-views that we pick that we want to watch. Unforgiven was your choice.
Yes.
And I have not watched it in years. So watching it this morning, there's a lot of things to go down on this show. But overall, I enjoyed it more than most of the shows I've been watching recently.
Yeah. No, definitely the same. And there's going to be a word that I use a lot on this show as far as describing the key difference between modern wrestling and our nostalgia wave of wrestling in 2002, and that is intensity. This show in general had a far deeper level of intensity in the matches, in the tone, in the way that people looked and conducted themselves. It is a much more intense scenario across the board.
Agreed. Now, speaking of intensity, Sean, I have a surprise for you.
Oh, boy.
You see, I have received notes from Josh Geddon.
Oh, about this. Oh, is it about this pay-per-view or about the WrestleMania Backlash? Oh, okay.
No, we need to have that Josh Geddon notes intro.
It's time for Josh Geddon's Notes of the Week. It's time for his Notes of the Week. Oh, yeah.
All right, Sean, are you ready for his opening thoughts on WWE Unforgiven 2002?
Yeah, this is quite the surprise. I am very surprised. My taint has been tickled.
I was going to watch the show, but I decided that watching Dragon Ball Super with my fiance Andy was a better use of my time. Apologies, my guys, but my inner Super Saiyan cuck is reaching a power level that is over 9,000! In the meantime, like, comment, and subscribe to TAW Gaming and YouTube today. Latest release is SCCG Episode 8 Palatable Power, which is a better show than any modern wrestling show and better than NWO and ACPW. Now, excuse me while I watch Goku kick alien ass and me and Andy do a lip and labia lockup. Later, losers.
My taint has been untickled. Josh, again, you're fired. Thanks for that plug. Appreciate that. And hopefully you and Andy know how to properly use plugs, but that's on your own time. You know, that's you do what you got to do.
Josh again basically just made a Tony Khan run-in.
Well, unfortunately, I'm
going to interrupt whatever the hell you guys are talking about to promote my show. Now go back to whatever you were doing.
I must admit, Josh Ageddon's booking is far more coherent than the incompetence of AEW. See what I did there? See what I did there?
With that pun.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten that unpleasantness behind us, what did you think about the show in general with the opening, JR and King, and then we finally get to our first matchup? What are your immediate impressions when this show opens versus what we get normally?
It felt like a wrestling show. It felt like a sports show watching that opening.
Yeah. And JR brings everybody in. I love, by the way, just kind of a sad side note, Gavin Rossdale's adrenaline is one of my favorite themes that they ever used for a wrestling package.
It was a really good wrestling package, too.
Yeah, I liked the open, although I'm not quite sure who it was that narrated that. But it still was pretty good. I think that it set the tone for what everybody was trying to do and what we were in for. And we start the crowd off with something of a spot pleaser. It is the Un-Americans, Christian, Lance Storm, William Regal, and Test versus the team, the hodgepodge team of Booker T, Goldust, Bubba Ray Dudley, and Kane. It is traditional non-America versus America. Your thoughts?
Now, you referenced the Mr. Khan a couple of minutes ago.
Yes.
But unfortunately, this is the type of match that inspired what AEW is today.
I could see that. I definitely could see that. I mean, I would still counter in that there was at least some logic to this matchup before the last 2.5 minutes. But
it's within that 2.5 minutes and certain spots within this match that the people who were watching it grew up to become AEW wrestlers and AEW fans.
Well, and a lot of that is really due in part to what this was. This was really the beginning of creating a generation of wrestlers who would like the nonsense. And that was the biggest problem with WWE being the only game in town for so damn long. But the Un-Americans come out. I must admit, the upside down flag is a bit bold for a logo, 1 year removed, basically to the day from 9/11.
I mean, it gets heel heat.
It did, and Vince always loved this patriotic storyline. They loved it. But I do have to say, if there was anyone who, did all right with it, these four were actually pretty good at getting the heat that they were looking for. And the Un-Americans, they lasted until 2005.
Yeah, I mean, they were there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, well, in different iterations, it ended up being, Christian ended up leaving the group, Test ended up leaving the group, and for a while it was just Lance Storm and William Regal. But
right.
They were still present, but of course Booker T, all of these baby faces get a pretty good pop. And JR, I didn't realize that JR, we always dump on JR's AEW commentary because he's sitting there just shitting on everything, and he makes pretty decent mistakes throughout the show, whether it's names or calling people what he shouldn't or what have you. Turns out that's been pretty constant for JR.
I mean, yeah, that's always been part of JR's style, but the difference is that here, he still has the energy to call the matches.
Yeah.
And he still, when talking, at the very least, brings oomph into every match he comes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And very shortly thereafter, the un-Americans are coming in. He's like, yeah, but here come the Unforgivens.
I mean, yeah.
Close enough. But then JR's like, oh, well, we're here in the Staples Center in LA where they're all making a fashionably late entrance, kind of dumping on the fact that LA, which is a sold-out crowd, just isn't there.
I mean, it was more so that they started the show and the fans quite weren't in the seats yet.
Yeah. But this is when they actually cared about time constraints. And this is something we'll mention. This show, which had 9 matches on it, was 2 hours and 40 minutes long. Just saying. It's possible to do it. They just don't, because they milk everything for so damn long now, and they didn't really do it here, because when they needed to get business done, they just got in and got it done.
Not to mention that there were only a couple of matches that really went long, and they were the matches that deserved to go long.
Right. Yeah. Unless you're Triple H, in which case every match you're in goes long.
Oh, okay, we'll get to the Triple H isms in a second,
Yeah,
but again,
we'll get there.
A lot of this review, I know it's just going to be me and Sean just dumping on modern wrestling, but let's just do it again, because why not?
It's fun.
This is why with AEW in particular, you don't give every match 20 minutes.
Yeah, because you grind your audience down to the bone, and you can't get them woken up at the times you need them to because they're just drained. It's
right, exactly. This was a spot fest, and it was what it was. It was an 8-man spot fest. It was 10 minutes. Booker T was easily the most over of the babyfaces.
Yeah, it's not surprising that he ended up being the one who got the WrestleMania spot against Triple H, even though we all know how that went down. I loved when they fake calls Goldust from Hollywood, California, and not 2 seconds later, JR's like, the son of a plumber from Austin, Texas. and King tried to cover for it. He's like, yeah, but, you know, he's from Hollywood, like right here in L.A., but
again, that's what Jerry Lawler was good at, was taking whatever JR was talking about and making it work.
But I will say this, though, to JR's credit. He was giving reasons for all of these, to like all of these baby faces without just saying, because he's American. He was giving backgrounds. He was saying, oh, Booker T, he was the 7th of, 7 children in an impoverished area in Houston, Texas. He was giving these people backgrounds so you had a reason to care about them beyond the fact that they were just representing America. And that's crucial to caring about the people themselves.
Exactly. Like, it's giving that backstory and putting it on just beyond. Like, if you were watching this pay-per-view without watching any of Raw or SmackDown, you wouldn't know any of these people. But JR is giving that context.
Yeah. And it was actually kind of refreshing to see an 8-man tag where not everyone is all color coordinated. They're still all themselves individually, which is nice because, it's nice to have everybody unite, but sometimes a hodgepodge team is just that, and you got to let them be just that.
It's one of those things where the Un-Americans are a proper stable, and the other team is just an alliance.
Right. And did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
I don't remember.
Yes, we did. It started the match. That's going to be a trend tonight. And
yay.
Yeah, yay indeed. Yay indeed. They did the double bionic elbow, which I didn't really care for, but it got a pop. But they still moved on. It was a very logically told babyfaces shine. They got the heat on, I believe, Goldie for quite some time. And then they have, just a small bit about Test. Because he was never, at least in my opinion, was never tremendous in the ring. But his intensity was so palpable whenever he was in the ring.
Or his intensity.
Yeah,
get it?
His intestinal fortitude, as they say. And
that was terrible on me. I apologize.
Yeah, you set me up for that. So we're both to blame. We are both to blame. The was up is a very weird move now I'm looking at it. Because that's clearly heel stuff.
No and yes. Because if you're a babyface, you enjoy watching a heel get hit in the balls.
Sure. but they always have to do it behind the referee's back, which is what makes it odd. You know, and there was actually a few Knux shots that the baby faces made that had to be swayed away by referee distraction, but at least they were paying attention to that kind of thing.
A little bit. Although, Bubba Ray Dudley, the low point for me of this match was him trying to bring a table into the ring.
Yeah, which didn't work, and they never used it, which was, I mean, that was Bubba's gimmick, right? That was his whole thing at that point. And then we get the "We Want Tables" chant.
Hold on. I'm not done yet. Where's Devon, though?
He's Reverend Devon on SmackDown.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
with
God.
Deacon Batista.
Oh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, and they tried to push Bubba, and they tried to push Devon, but there's a reason that by Royal Rumble 03, they're back together.
What would have happened if Bubba Ray Dudley had become Bully Ray?
I don't think he was ready for that yet. I don't think that he was the you know, I like Bubba, but I don't think he was the worker, nor was he the orator to become Bully Ray at that moment. He really needed to kind of tone up his physical stature. You know, he wasn't ready for that gimmick. You know, in a very similar way to how Roman Reigns wasn't really ready to be a heel until 2020.
Okay, that's fair.
And then we get the crowd chant of "We Want Tables." Look how much has changed in 20 years.
But again, that's the whole thing of this is the type of spot and the type of gimmicks that inspire the AEW fans and the WWE fans that scream, "We want tables."
Yeah. But
so Bubba Ray Dudley, you are partially to blame for modern wrestling's shittiness.
Well, and I don't know if he would necessarily deny that, because he was part of that original ECW crew, and I'm not. That's not a knock or a criticism. It's just what happened. And what's amazing to me is just how unique everyone's offense in here is. Like, they all have something that makes them their own. Like, Christian had a really unique snapmare that I've never seen anybody do. And then Regal had that weird overhead suplex that was almost a Tazplex, like a belly to belly, but it wasn't. It was
unique offense because the Un-Americans are all very underrated in terms of how they wrestle.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it was just something that you could just tell. And honestly, even though this match was a spot fest in that last few minutes, the fact that there was logic in the majority of this already puts this head and shoulders above most 8-man tags that we've gotten in the past 10 years or so. And then Kane gets a hot tag. LOL.
I mean, that's what he was there for.
That's what he was there for, and, you know, it's Kane. Because the fire still burns, so it's obviously a hot tag. Then... That's right, and this is just match one, folks. Then this combusts. You know, everybody gets into the ring, but...
Damn it.
Yeah.
You with your stupid fire and explosion puns.
That one wasn't intentional. That one was not an arson pun. At least not in that form. But anyway. Anyway. So this breaks down. Everybody starts fighting. But did you notice, Sky, that within almost 10 seconds of everybody coming into the ring, all the illegal men went to the outside?
Well, they did the whole thing of everyone does their signature move and then they roll out of the ring.
Yeah, which was not a surprise. I forgot how cool Test's gut wrench power slam looked.
It's hard because Test has been dead for so long that we haven't seen enough of his wrestling.
Yeah, the next time we do an actual normal our kind of structured show, we should take a look at Test. Because he is really a fascinating wrestler, and but there was always something missing from him.
It doesn't help that Test can do a couple of cool moves and moves around very well for a big man, but it's just not interesting as a talker.
Yeah. No, the personality just wasn't there, which is a shame. But, sometimes that's just what happens. It was pretty much, Kane gets the pin after Regal tries to go for the power of the punch. Kane already chokeslams Lance Storm. just punches, just decks Regal. And while this did definitely break down towards the end, there was still structure to this 8-man tag, and the energy was just so different.
Well, again, it helps that this is the hot period for WWE, coming off the Attitude Era and defeating WCW, moving into Ruthless Aggression era, which personally is my favorite era of wrestling.
Same, because it has the best wrestling, because there's so many good wrestlers on the show that, and this pay-per-view is a perfect example of that. Any one of these matches, given the right set of circumstances, except for maybe Rosey and Jamal versus Billy and Chuck, but pretty much all the rest of these matches could have been really high-end, prominent matches in any scenario of modern wrestling, just for what they are.
Exactly. And again, this was a good way to warm up the crowd.
Yep. Which it did once they actually all showed up in the building. And by the end of this match, most everybody was there.
Yep.
And then we get a 90-second package backstage, and then we're on to the next match. Not a 2.5 minute of Big E looking everywhere but into the camera. It was just, all right, this is what you're here to do. We're going to take somebody out, and then HLA, but we'll get to that later. And that was it. 90 seconds. Quick in and out, and then we're on to the next match. If they cut back in modern wrestling just their backstage and commercial time, they would have a 2.5 hour show. But
we don't.
But we don't. But that's how long I want a pay-per-view package backstage to go. 90 seconds or less. Get in, get what you need to say out, and let's move on.
Yep. And they move on to the next match, which surprised me.
Yeah, it's this one was, this whole pay-per-view really was more set up than not, but this was set up to something that was going to happen later on in the show. So I don't necessarily dislike it, but I don't necessarily love it either. It's Chris Jericho versus Ric Flair for the Intercontinental Championship. And I totally forgot that Flair, they couldn't get Flair's proper, like, WCW music.
Oh, God, I hated that music.
This was the 1992 Ric Flair knockoff music because they hadn't gotten the rights, or Vince just didn't want to pay for it yet.
I think it's because they didn't get the rights for it.
Yeah. And they had to actually do the same thing because they, when Hollywood Hogan was there and they used Jimi Hendrix's Voodoo Child, they actually had to dub over it when Sony got the rights to Jimi Hendrix's music, and they're like, yeah, no, you can't use this. So they made a ripoff that is in all of Hogan's, all of the Hollywood Hogan stuff from WWE, which is also equally cringe. Especially when he sings Voodoo Child and there's no lyrics. But in any case, this was a scenario where Flair had kind of lost his confidence. And if the angle was that Flair had lost a step, which is what they were going for, this match did tell that pretty well.
Well, the whole thing, though, was that this was a continuation of the feud they had at SummerSlam, because they show that Ric Flair actually made Chris Jericho tap out, and they also, in the video package, also showed that they didn't just do it once, but twice. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so they come into here, but here's the thing I noticed about this match. Jericho was running most of this.
I mean, it's Ric Flair, as a 52-year-old?
Yeah, but even still, some of his later stuff beyond this, once Evolution started, he didn't look like this. This was like Jericho was leading most of the way in a lot of different ways. Even the bumps he was taking, the way that it was almost like he was calling this thing. Flair did make me laugh, though, when he went to take his robe off and he went to go toss it to somebody, and he sat there holding his robe for 15 seconds waiting for somebody to be down there to catch it. And he finally just all right, fine. And he just drops the rope.
Because those things are expensive. You don't want to drop them on the ground.
I know. Did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
I believe we did.
Yes, we did. We are 2 for 2. And then
Right.
it just started. It just was there. You know, I loved Jericho's Kurt Hennig bump when Flair countered the high intensity, the second rope. I think he was going to go for an axe handle, and Flair just punched him in the gut, and Jericho did the stomp and flip over.
Yep, that was a very good spot. Was Ric Flair good, or was Jericho carrying him?
Well, that was kind of my point. It really did feel like Jericho was bearing the brunt of the work in this match.
I mean, that's not a surprise given Flair's age, but Flair, for a 52-year-old, actually moves pretty well, all things considered.
Oh, yeah. He definitely is better than 72 years old. But let's not talk about that.
In a weird Twitter video with Jay Lethal.
Yeah, I'd rather not talk about that. But the one thing I liked about this match, and this kind of is another overall point, this match kept moving, but moves still had time to register.
I mean, some moves did. It depended on the move and how important it was, integral part was to the match.
Right. But it wasn't like everybody getting back up and doing a jillion counters back and forth. That wasn't how this match felt in the tone of it all. It just really felt like Flair was a step behind. To the point where what Triple H said later on, you actually kind of saw it here.
And again, that's part of what was Ric Flair's gimmick at the time, is that he is not what he once was, and he's kind of stuck being that guy.
Yep. And then Flair tries to work on the knee. Jericho feigns the injury. And then when they go to get what'd you think of this finish?
It's a finish that Jericho outsmarting the sturdiest player in the game. I think it's fair.
Well, that part I like. It's just the execution of this was weird.
Yeah, it was really weird watching Jericho. Like he was trying to fake it, and he was doing it long enough where maybe something's happening. I don't know. It never got to the believable part where he's actually hurt.
Right, especially once the trainer gets out and little Nate goes to talk to the trainer, and then Jericho just pops up, boom, boom, and then Walls of Jericho, and then the tap out was almost immediate for Flair.
Well, I mean, there was a little bit of time for Jericho to sit with Flair in the Walls of Jericho.
Yeah, it wasn't like Shayna Baszler when she first started, before she started biting the neck off Becky Lynch.
No.
But
no.
at the same time, this match wasn't great, but it was the perfect setup for what Flair was going to do for the next 3 years.
It was, and also, again, it's a good mid-card title match. That's all it needed to be.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be anything more than that.
And that was pretty much it for this one. There really wasn't much to say, but again, it's more setup for what they're trying to do, and that I will not knock.
Exactly. And then speaking of setup, now earlier after that 8-man tag, we had Stephanie McMahon talking to Billy and Chuck. Here we get Eric Bischoff talking to Rosey and Jamal.
Yep.
And then Rico shows up, and I forgot about Rico existed.
Rico is so much better than that garbage gimmick he had on main roster television. I implore all of you to watch some Rico Constantino in OVW. It's a completely different guy. And it's not nearly as offensive.
I really hope so.
It's not nearly as offensive. And I honestly never hated Rico. I saw him live once. It's just that this was just... He's quirky. It's definitely... I like the quirky part of Rico. He could definitely talk, and he definitely did his best with what he was given. But this was kind of that start of... Rico was one of the first examples of you go to the main roster, there's no guarantee that you're going to get something usable.
But you guys got to try and make it work, which he did try to do his best with.
Yeah, but it was a necessary defection to go from Billy and Chuck to now from the effeminate hairstylist to the effeminate hairstylist managing two giant Samoans. That's a pretty lateral move.
Yeah.
But again, 90 seconds. Not that it was not even 2 minutes, and they got in. Then we got a shot of Shaq back when him wrestling a match would have been feasible and interesting. But it wasn't. Instead, he just got some play punches from his kid, and that was kind of cool. It was kind of nice to see him.
Again, the celebrity cameos were fun.
Yeah, and well, this one was. The one later on made no sense at all.
Oh God, we'll talk.
And
about
we'll
that.
get to that. We will get to that. But up next is, if Kurt and Benoit weren't on this show, this would be my favorite match of the night.
Exactly. Like, each brand, Raw and SmackDown, had... Wait, this was a SmackDown match. No, never mind.
Yeah, SmackDown pretty much had, like, across the board, the best action on the show. Which is why, in that time, a lot of people wanted to watch SmackDown a lot more than they wanted to watch Raw.
Oh, yeah, because I forget the SmackDown 6.
Yeah.
Edge, Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, and Chris Benoit. And Heyman's famous quote that I literally could put any of the 6 in a combination against each other and get a great match out of it.
Yeah, and that was No Mercy is when they had that whole title tournament.
Exactly.
The pay-per-view after this.
Rey Mysterio and Chavo Guerrero, think about this, wrestled as the pre-show heat match to not get on, that didn't get on the pay-per-view.
Which still would probably be really good. So,
but it also proves that the level of talent that existed on WWE's roster in 2002 is so much better than 20 years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's names on these shows. But this match is Edge versus Eddie Guerrero, the sequel to their SummerSlam match that Edge won. And I loved everything about this match. I have, like, no complaints about anything on this matchup.
Even the fact that they didn't do a collar and elbow tie-up?
I won't be upset about that because it was Eddie being crafty.
Well, also, it was because Edge was angry at Eddie, so it didn't need a collar and elbow tie-up. The hot start was better.
Yeah.
This was a heated feud because Eddie had given Edge a concussion.
Yeah, and this 3 days earlier. But at the same time, Edge comes back, he's hot, and anytime they didn't do a collar and elbow tie-up, there was a reason why it was warranted not to have it. Instead of, oh look, we're surprised that a match that warrants a collar and elbow tie-up gets it, and none of the matches that also warrant a collar and elbow tie-up just don't have them.
Exactly.
You know, and that's kind of my overall point with, that was always my overall point with the collar and elbow tie-up counter. And this is a good way, this pay-per-view is a good way to kind of demonstrate why I made such a hoopla about that for so many years.
And continues to.
Yes, and I will not stop. I love the, I forgot about Rob Zombie Edge. I forgot he had that theme. And I love that theme.
And I forgot that Eddie Guerrero had this Latino Heat theme.
Yeah, which is also quite good. It's, and this was... everything, I have nothing bad to say about this match. I just, every time I think back of it, this is one of those matches that I always remember fondly, which this is, I said to Skylar before we started this is one of my all-time favorite pay-per-views. And while there's things that I have, for obvious reasons, had blocked out of my head for being so cringe, it's matches like this that gave me the reason to put that as criteria.
Exactly. Like, there are legitimately at least 3 really, really good matches, arguably 4, depending on how you feel about Triple H.
Right.
But there is at least 3 or 4 legitimately great matches. And these are not even main event matches. These are just mid-card / upper mid-card matches. But because of how well they're structured and how well they're told, this match, Edge and Eddie Guerrero, could easily main event a pay-per-view.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Match of the card.
And you know, I bet you that if Eddie had remained alive through the next 5 years or so after he passed, it probably would have. They probably would have main evented a pay-per-view with Edge and Eddie Guerrero. Why not? Both of them have been world champions at that point. They just were on different shows.
Exactly, and Guerrero probably would have been another world champion because he was supposed to win the world title from Batista.
Yep, and would have gotten a huge pop for that, but unfortunately, it is what it is. But
again, the whole context thing. They talk about the concussion that happened 3 days earlier because why? That's the story of the match. Eddie Guerrero working on Edge's neck and his concussion.
yeah, and working on his head and all of that, and this is pre neck injury from Edge, because that happened in 2003 that caused Edge to take off almost an entire year so that he could then rehab his neck. So this was before Edge even had any of those problems. And there's only one thing that's kind of weird, and Bubba Dudley did this as well. It's the flapjack move, but you only have half of a flap. You know, it's worse. The one guy does the flapjack instead of both guys being able to lift both legs so that the guy comes down on the flapjack. It just looks weird.
Because Edge does not want to share his flapjacks. Thank you.
That's right. But why cook half a pancake? You know, what I mean?
No.
I'm just, it's just weird, but I am picking so fine a nit here.
You're trying to find something you're trying to find something in a match to hate, but you can't.
I'm trying to find something to critique, but there really is nothing to critique here. You know,
even again, Michael Cole and Taz were great on commentary.
Yeah, this is peak Michael Cole. This is Michael Cole. Taz was a great counter to him. You know, before he was way overmanaged. And it's just, you could tell the times are different because I forget the word that Taz was having trouble saying, and Cole corrected Taz on a word. Think about that compared to today's Michael Cole.
Exactly. And again, Taz explaining the moves, calling them by name. He is the perfect color commentator.
Yeah. As far as move analysis and why things hurt and why they're effective, nobody does it quite like Taz.
Right, and especially when it comes to the Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit match that comes up later. But again, he's explaining why Eddie Guerrero is focusing on Edge's neck and head.
Yep. And, you know, one of the things I did really like about this match, too, is when Edge he had Irish whipped Eddie into the corner, and Edge goes to follow, chase after him, and Eddie Guerrero gets the elbow counter, which we see all the time in modern wrestling, but Eddie waited until the absolute last second to get that elbow up to hit Edge. And sometimes it's just the execution of little stuff like that makes such a difference. And that was also at a time when that didn't feel so expected.
Exactly.
And then that great tornado DDT shortly thereafter, which started getting the heat. And another good thing about Eddie Guerrero, name me another human being in professional wrestling who did that double wing head twist. Where he had Edge's arms behind his legs and just wrenched his head. That was so creative.
I can't. It's the uniqueness of Eddie Guerrero and why no one has ever been able to do what Eddie does.
Yeah. And seriously, despite the effort, because there's been a lot of effort.
but everyone focuses on Eddie's frog splash, the shimmy and shake, and the Three Amigos. But people forget that Eddie is also a great catch-can-trained wrestler.
Yeah, there was so much more to Eddie than just his signature moves in the latter years of his career. There's so much more to Eddie than that. And I think that really, in large part, has been lost due to the amount of nostalgia pandering that they've been trying to do with him.
Exactly.
Then the wrestling chants, let's go. Well, actually, we got Let's Go Edge and we got Let's Go Eddie, because Eddie was starting to gain popularity because of just how damn good he was.
Again, it doesn't matter because everyone was over.
Yeah, and if you notice, all of the chants on this show, with the exception of We Want Tables and HLA, all of the chants were more about the wrestlers than about the fans jerking themselves off.
Exactly. It wasn't the fans trying to get themselves over in the situation.
And it makes all the difference in the tone of a show when the fans themselves are invested in that regard, rather than thinking that they're just as important as the wrestlers themselves.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
Now, here's my question. Edge at this time hadn't won the world title yet, right?
Correct. He was a few years away from that.
So, again, it's kind of a shame because we didn't get prime Edge. Like, Edge is very good here, but he wasn't prime Edge yet.
Right. Yeah. Because he hadn't showcased just how dastardly a heel he was going to end up being.
Right. He wasn't the rated R superstar. He was just a superstar.
Yeah. And that's not to take anything away from him, but this Edge was perfect as a significantly over mid-card guy, mid-card babyface. This worked for him. And Eddie was doing a great job of building up the sympathy. Edge was selling wonderfully. Like we said before, the story of the head work, post-concussion. You know, that's the weak spot. The hope spot they did, that where he got a flurry, he goes to hit the ropes, and bam, back elbow, down he goes. It's
simple. It's a creative.
Yeah. And then I loved this too, as Eddie goes to, I think he Irish whips, he's going to pick up Edge for an Irish whip, but Edge just gives one punch, down goes Eddie, down goes Edge, and one good punch forces a ref to count.
Exactly.
Wrestling is not as hard as these people are making it seem. In the modern era, it's really not that hard. This is so much different. And this is all intensity. And boy, do I miss flash photography.
It was just cool having the camera people be at ringside and taking those pictures. Yeah,
well, because it made the moves that were about to happen look that much more engaging and that much more exciting, because everyone's like, I need to capture this moment. Instead of everybody holding their phones and you don't see any of that. You know, it's small stuff like flash photography actually did, I think, help the entire tone of this show.
Yep, but we have to talk about this finish because it's an Eddie Guerrero finish, but it's really, really well done.
Yeah, and right before we get to this finish, I love when the referee, when Jimmy Corderas, former CIW superstar Jimmy Corderas, goes and pushes Eddie back, and Eddie's like, I'm sorry. My bad. He like pushes him aside and just keeps going. He's just so damn good. I just love Eddie. It was great. And then Edge, after he gets a neck breaker on Eddie, goes right back to selling his own neck. You know, the missed missile drop kick may have again hurt himself. Cole was selling this well.
Exactly. The missed spear by Edge going into the executioner DDT and then leading to that missile, and then leading to that false count with Eddie putting his foot on the rope.
With his foot on the ropes. I loved it wasn't necessarily a 1-2 on their knees, but it was pretty close to it. It still looked like they were just exhausted, but just fighting from their knees instead of, okay, we're going to get on our knees and then you're going to pinch me and I'm going to punch you and you're going to punch me. It felt organic. It felt correct. Right. The Lucha Rana to the power bomb.
Oh, that was amazing. And then Eddie Guerrero, again, and this is another thing too, where it felt organic. Eddie brushes up against the turnbuckle. He notices it's a little loose. So he decides, okay, I'm going to take this off. He takes it off, tries to Irish whip Edge into it. Edge counters it, and Eddie gets a little bit of payback, his back against the turnbuckle, and Edge spears him. Then Edge puts him on the top rope. But Eddie, the smart man that he is, grabs Edge's forehead, pushes it into the turnbuckle, then does that sunset flip powerbomb on Edge's neck with a little bit of the tights.
And that was a hell of a finish, but there's one little detail that I want to correct you on, Skyler, because when he takes that turnbuckle pad and loosens it, it doesn't fall off until somebody runs into the ropes, and then the pad drops so everybody can see that he loosened the turnbuckle pad. It's expert. He loosened it just enough to where if it got jostled any, bam, there it goes. Everybody sees exactly what just happened.
Exactly.
It's so well done. And then when he actually does hit Edge's head on the top of that turnbuckle, Corderas can't see it because it's all happening right near where he is, but he can't actually see that the buckle had been exposed, Eddie.
And because he's focusing on Edge and Eddie, Corderas doesn't recognize that, wait, the turnbuckle's off.
Yeah, until it's over, until the tights and the sunset flip and all of that. God, I love this match. This match is fantastic. Everything about this was great.
Exactly.
This is so refreshing, Sky, just to be able to be like, I loved everything about this match. We never get to do this.
Except for select matches of the week.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And that's very select at that, because I sometimes am known to be an asshole and pick bad matches on purpose. But
right.
Then...
Now, here's the thing.
Yep.
We get the backstage interview. Or not backstage interview, just confrontation.
Between Trips and Van Dam. And Flair is sitting in the corner. Triple H kind of runs him down. Is like, you've got no passion. You have got no heart. See that guy right there? He used to have heart. Now he's just a loser. And Flair gets up and Van Dam goes like, hey, bro, I would rather hang out with a loser like him than a so-called winner like you any day. And, Triple H kind of goes, heh, and then walks out of the ring. Or walks out of the locker room. And that took all of 2 minutes.
Exactly.
What were your thoughts on this whole little thing? Because you mentioned something to me about Van Dam resembling somebody.
This is why I can't like Matt Riddle or Riddle, because he doesn't have... Rob Van Dam would, act goofy. But when it came to be serious, he was serious. Yeah.
Well, and he was also much better spoken than Matt Riddle, although that's hardly Riddle's fault. But if you see Matt Riddle on Instagram, he really doesn't sound that much different than he does in reading WWE scripted garbage. But Van Dam doesn't sound like a toddler when he's talking, even if he's high as fuck.
Exactly. Also, one more thing. Triple H's nose was very prominent in this backstage confrontation.
I've noticed that his nose level is directly proportional to the amount of facial hair he's got. Because you don't notice it as much when he has a lot of facial hair. But when he was clean shaven, that nose just bronk. Big Bird is like, damn, that's pretty big.
Right. Now we get to the stinker of the show.
This match itself wasn't bad, but the stipulation is so stupid. So the story behind this was the beginning of the Raw versus SmackDown deal, which would eventually lead to everybody's favorite company softball game, to quote Josh Ageddon, Survivor Series. But the stipulation here was if Rosey and Jamal of Raw beat SmackDown's Billy and Chuck, then Stephanie McMahon would have to perform some hot lesbian action later on in the show. And if Billy and Chuck won... Then, if Billy and Chuck won, then Eric Bischoff would have to kiss Stephanie's ass. And I personally don't see where the downside of that one was. None of this made sense. This was purely to satisfy the seemingly voracious sexual repression of both the crowd and Vince McMahon.
And then we get the video package of the Billy and Chuck wedding.
Which is another discussion we'll have to talk about at some point. Between Eric Bischoff foiling the wedding, between the wedding being like, oh, you guys are committed, and then Billy and Chuck being like, yo, bro, we're not gay. We're just like tag partners who like hang around a lot and wear tight clothing and hang around a lot. And so they just like completely dumped on the storyline, on the whole gimmick during that wedding ceremony. And then I personally had forgot the feminist protest. I had forgotten about that, and I think that might be cringier than the wedding.
Which, by the way, some of the women that were part of that feminist protest would appear later on tonight as part of Eric Bischoff's posse.
Oh, we'll talk about that in a little bit, because there is something really funny there. Because remember, it's definitely in this one. When the first package that Bischoff, Rosey, and Jamal did, there were a couple ladies there who he was saying, oh, look at these fine lesbians. Which one of you would like to be Stephanie's hooba to stank? And, there was like, oh, I would. Does that sound like fun, girls? Yeah. those girls, we'll talk about them when we get to the next package with them, because there's something really funny about that I want to mention. But
all right. But again, the whole thing about this video package, about this storyline involving Eric Bischoff versus Stephanie, it's everything that's wrong with the Attitude Era.
Well, especially because it's post-Attitude Era. And
it was one thing when it was in the Attitude Era. It's over. We don't need stuff like this.
And honestly, most of the fans didn't really care for this at all.
No, they didn't care about the match, okay? Jamal and Rosey, they're both big fat Samoans.
They're big fat green Samoans.
Oh boy, were they green.
Yeah, and it was their first match. And listen, Billy Gunn, who is a tag team veteran, and Chuck Palumbo, who's definitely good enough in his own right, were good guys to have to kind of like lead them through this match, but they led them through this match.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
By the way, I forgot that Chuck Palumbo was this skinny.
Yeah. No, he was. He was in great shape at the time. You know, but also in comparison to Rosey and Jamal. You know, but...
I mean, that was not a very hard comparison.
No. But even the small details like Fink and Tony Chimmel, those guys were great. I miss announcers like that. Not the ones that all sound like Greg the Hamwich Hamilton.
Because they all have their own voices.
Yeah, they all were distinct. And then Billy and Chuck coming out to music that Santina Morella would later use.
Yeah. By the way, we don't get a collar and double tap. We just get all four of them fighting in the ring at the same time. And then separating the referee.
Yeah, and even in 2002, people didn't really care about SmackDown versus Raw. They weren't really picking those sides, realistically speaking. And
I mean, if it was like good competition stuff, then we would care. But again, it's the whole thing of we don't really care that Stephanie and Eric are doing this thing.
Yeah, especially because they make out at the Halloween party a month and a half later. So,
by the way, Rico is so green. Like,
well, it's not Rico's fault that he got stymied with this gimmick and then he's just sitting there doing, you know, he's not the manager. That wasn't what he was good at. Honestly, he's the one person in this whole thing I kind of felt for. Because
I felt for Billy Gunn and I felt for Chuck Palumbo because Rosey and Jamal are both awful.
At this time, yeah. And I will say, though, there was small stuff like having a cheap shot and then the cheap shot gets to a double team. Because Billy Gunn tries to get in and the referee gets cut out, you know, the referee gets there and then they cut him off. It was a basic style match because it had to be because Rosey and Jamal were so green. But you don't see even the basics like this in modern wrestling. You don't see this kind of tag match still outdoes most tag matches today.
Yeah,
still,
that's true.
And there's not a backslap tag in sight anywhere on this show. Didn't get one.
Even as annoying as bad as Jamal and Rosey were, they always tagged the hands.
Yep. And Rosey's second rope moonsault. Oh, Lord. That was
better than Charlotte's moonsault.
Yeah, well, that's not very difficult. I guess because there's no way Rosey's landing on his feet. That's a fact. But the hot tag, the hot tag got a pop for Billy, but it was, they were really not into this. I did like, however, the in and out bump that Umaga took. I'm calling him Umaga, we're talking about Jamal, but that he took when Billy Gunn gave him the clothesline to really sell that Billy Gunn has a hell of a clothesline.
Yep.
That was,
again, there was elements of the thing where maybe in time you could do something with these guys, especially Umaga, because Umaga turned out to be so good.
Yeah. And Rosey just got stymied with the Hurricane gimmick.
It's also one of those things where Jamal is actually not a bad name for a guy.
No.
Rosey? What are you going to do with Rosey?
Yeah, not much. Turn him into a superhero, which is what they did. I did like the meeting of the minds that both Samoans no-sold, and then they just double-headed Billy Gunn.
I mean, what were you going to expect?
I know.
Trying to do Meeting of the Minds with two big giants.
Yeah, it was just... there was elements of good with Rosey and Jamal. They just were so in it. They just needed ring time. Like the full Nelson Flatliner. That looked awesome. And...
Now, here's a question for you, because I think you know this answer better than I do. Was 3-minute warning in OVW for a while?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I'm not positive on that, but I don't believe so. Which would kind of make sense.
Because very clearly, again, we've heard the stories from Jim Cornette about how John Laurinaitis would always try to rush people up.
Yeah. Well, and when you got two Samoans, and then this was kind of the, I mean, especially with the bloodline, no pun intended, that they have, it's no surprise that two big Samoans would end up being the twinkle in Vince McMahon's eye. I do love the pop-up Samoan drop as a finish. Probably was better than the Samoan spike.
Well, the Samoan spike is a good setup move.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that was it. But if Umaga had the Samoan spike and then used the pop-up Samoan drop as a finish, that would have been ideal, because the pop-up Samoan drop as a finish looks awesome.
Exactly.
But they're the heels, but because everybody wanted to see Steph do HLA, everybody cheered when the heels won. But they didn't give a crap about this match, and I don't blame them at all.
There was nothing to this match except the stipulation.
Yeah. And that wasn't very strong to give this match much legs.
No.
No.
And by the way, this is one of the last matches that Billy and Chuck have, because they had that 8-team tournament, and Chuck, no, it was Billy Gunn separated his shoulder and had to take time off. So
yeah,
eventually,
Yeah, and we didn't really see much of Billy Gunn after that. We saw a little bit, but not a lot from Billy.
He became
before.
Mr. Ass again. So
yeah, and then he was there for a hot cup of coffee, and then he left to go join Road Dogg in TNA. And
then Chuck Palumbo joined the full-blooded Italians.
Yeah, well, which is not necessarily the worst place for him, but in any case, then they do the package.
No, we get Eric Bischoff with 3 lesbians.
Oh, right. This is the one I was talking about. Which one of you ladies would like to HLA with Stephanie? And they're like, oh, me, ooh, me, ooh, me. And he's like, all right, well, let's see who wants it the most. But let's get the chant. And he starts doing HLA, and the fans are chanting it. And I will never not laugh at this cutaway from Bischoff chanting HLA, the girls chanting HLA, the crowd chanting HLA. Then they cut to JR and King, and King's like, HLA! HLA!
And then the best part is that none of these 3 ladies were part of the angle later.
No, you know why that's so funny? Because they do that package later, which we'll talk about after this match. They do this package where Rosey and Jamal and Rico are like hanging out with all the women who are supposed to be lesbians, but then they all go off to hang out with the guys. Rico's supposed to be gay, and all the women are supposed to be lesbians, and yet they're all going off to have heterosexual Samoan sex. Well thought out, WWE. Well thought out.
Well, it was very clearly, at the very least, they're bisexual.
Yeah, and that's no knock on any of those people. For those people who actually lived that lifestyle, this show was kind of insulting to most of those ideas, but it's not coming from us.
No, it's coming from the brainchild, or in this case, the crotch child, known as Vince McMahon. But anyways.
But speaking of things that are the child of Vince McMahon, it's time for our World Heavyweight title match. See what I did there?
Yep.
It is World Heavyweight Champion Triple H, the man who was gifted the big gold belt by Eric Bischoff, thus kickstarting the Reign of Terror against Rob Van Dam. And you would think that this match would be a clash of styles, but I thought they actually worked pretty well together.
They did work very well together because, again, you have 2 very, very good wrestlers here.
Yes. Now, what did you think about this match?
This was a very good match, but this is also why we have Triple H isms.
Yeah. And also, there were some WWE hashtag bad formatting things that they put in this matchup, more so than others.
Yeah, and also, it's very specifically Raw.
Yeah.
Because Monday Night Raw became associated with it. It infected SmackDown too, but Raw got it first.
Yeah. And this is, again, I really like Triple H. I always have liked Triple H. I always will like Triple H. But this was not Triple H's finest hour as far as what in the next couple of years, even though he was world champion for most of them. But this, did we get a Colonial tie-up in this match?
We did.
Yes, sir. We are 3 for 5, which is unheard of in modern wrestling for Colonial tie-ups. I liked the fact that King was like alluding to Rob Van Dam liking weed, but he was being super subtle about it.
He was not being subtle.
Well, but he wasn't being like, well, Van Dam smokes weed. And it was like, no, it's like, oh, Van Dam, and you're here in California, so, you know. And it was more subtle than I expected from Jerry the King Lawler.
Well, the subtleties went out the window with the following match, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That's when King really started to sour on me, actually. But we'll get there. But
you are right that Jerry the King Lawler did mention one thing kind of at the beginning of this match, is that he mentioned the whole Ric Flair confrontation at the beginning, because it was in the back of everybody's mind that Ric Flair was involved in that.
Right. Which was important for the finish of this match. So they did a good job of making sure that everybody was still kind of remembering what had gone on previously, unlike WWE now, which is like nothing has ever come up previously. Everything's happening now in real time, and nothing's from the past unless we tell you it's from the past. But only after it happens. So, but I like the idea of this matchup in respect of the battle of demeanors. Is not a premise you see very often in pro wrestling. Of the Triple H, I'm serious, I'm taking this seriously. Rob Van Dam, you're way too calm, you're way too collected. You clearly don't have the passion for this business that I do. That's such a unique premise that you don't really see used very often.
Yeah, agreed.
And I do like, there was more wrestling, like proper chain wrestling from Rob than we normally get. Which I thought was also very intriguing, maybe because he was trying to match what, the comparison that JR gave, where it was basically, who was it, Harley Race and Jack Briscoe. He said that Triple H was a combination of, which is a very interesting comparison. What did you think of the you can spit some water part of this matchup?
Hashtag mind games, question mark?
That's a good way to put it. I actually kind of liked when Rob just kind of like joking around, just like, Again,
it's insulting Triple H and messing with him, which it worked.
It did, because then he ran right after him, and Van Dam again got a headlock takeover. They did the double bridge to the leg sweep, which I thought was good. There were a couple double bridges that we saw in this matchup, in this show. Not knocking that. Boy, did that crash and burn on the plancha look bad.
Oh, that was very bad, but yeah.
But
intense.
The intensity. And it was a great heat spot. Because then Triple H comes back in and tries to go for count out. They're like, I'm gonna win with count out. And he probably should have.
Probably should have. Also, by the way, at this point, no one else had done a dive yet. So when RVD did it, it was unique.
And everybody popped for it. And also, Van Dam didn't really make it to the count of 10. So Hebner had to kind of be like, Triple H, go get him so I don't have to count 10. But we're kind of at the point where I kind of have to count 10. So that's when Triple H came down, and then we got the Triple H stare spot. And
you always have to have it.
It's a Triple H-ism. I would have been surprised if we didn't get it. Then we get the slingshot on the second rope to Van Dam's neck. And this whole match just screamed intensity.
Again, RVD was a very, very good seller. He was more realistic in the way that he was selling Triple H's offense than most people do nowadays.
Absolutely, and I think to a lot of fans in WWE at least, say what you want about the ECW fans, but this was probably the first time, and during this match, I think Van Dam proved that if he wanted to be, or if he could be World Championship material.
Which he is.
Which he is. He totally is. And and then Triple H started using the sleeper, which he used for a hot cup of coffee. But boy, does that fit his style.
Slow, methodical. Yeah, that's Triple H in a nutshell.
Yeah. You wonder why Randy Orton became the way he became. With slow and slow and slow and methodical. But I liked the use of the sleeper here. I forget who it was, but on an episode of Raw leading up to this, Triple H actually beat someone with it.
I can't remember.
I can't remember who it was, but that was one of those things when moves meant more. Triple H used the sleeper and beat someone with a sleeper on television prior to this match, so when he got the sleeper on Van Dam, everyone's like, oh, well, maybe this actually will win the match.
Well, this was also at a time when moves that were not finishers were winning matches, because we just talked about the pop-up Samoan drop, which is usually a signature, not a finisher. Same thing with the Eddie Guerrero doing the sunset flip powerbomb, which is usually not a finisher.
Yep. But it was still effective. You know, it's all context. It's all about how they're used and in what way they're used. And this was great, because then Van Dam, after that sleeper, he woke up. The crowd woke up. And then we got all of the flashy Van Dam stuff. You know, the cartwheel standing moonsault, the rolling thunder. And both guys really started showing fatigue. They both sold fatigue very well.
Because, again, this is a longer match. So because it's longer, you're going to feel it.
And it was a world title match, which is what... And this was at the time when the world heavyweight title still felt like a world title. So even though it was going on halfway in the show, it still felt like it.
Exactly, because this was, again, middle of the show, but still big, important guys wrestling over a big, important belt.
Right. Now, what did you think about this ref bump? And what did you think about the ref bump?
I would have been fine with it if they didn't do it in the main event, too.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. I almost wish... After I had watched, because I think it felt more important to do the ref bumps they did in the main event than it did here. To the point where I wish that they actually hadn't done the ref bump here and had just saved it for the main event. Because the ref bumps in the main event actually were part of telling the story. This was just, let's get the ref out of here so we could spend 3 or 4 minutes of the ref being knocked out to get the angle that we need to get across.
I mean, the question is, could you have done the angle of Ric Flair betraying... Well, hold on. I think we're skipping a little bit, but... Could you have done the angle of Ric Flair screwing over RVD in a way that would still involve... that the referee was still there?
I think so. Because if you... Let's say you do this. Van Dam goes to hit his... You know, he doesn't hit the 5-star, but he hits something big... And while they're doing this, Triple H, kicks out or gets his foot on the ropes or whatever. Van Dam's a little frustrated, Then Triple H gets a thumb to the eye or something, does the face buster, maybe hits a pedigree, and Van Dam rolls out of the ring. And then Triple H is like, I'm going to finish this. Goes and gets a sledgehammer, brings it into the ring. The referee is like, no, you can't use this. Kind of wrestles around with it, takes it. As he's going to put it away, put the sledgehammer away, Ric Flair comes down, gets his own sledgehammer, does this moment, wham, hits Van Dam, rolls out of the ring, drops the sledgehammer, Triple H hits the pedigree, 1, 2, 3, the ref doesn't go down. You could have done it without the ref bump. But this is what I'm saying about modern formatting, this hashtag bad formatting. the ref was down forever. And there's no other referees in the back?
What do you expect?
I know. But you don't, but there's no referees in the back who wouldn't have come up and taken care of that. It's just that's
Especially
where...
because they did that in the main event with the SmackDown referees.
Right, well, but they didn't get a second referee. It was Brian Hebner the whole way through. At least to that credit, it was Brian Hebner the whole way through. This, to me, was just was too long of a ref bump. Because then we get the 5-star, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 count again. And, Van Dam goes, and Triple H gets the cheating. Then he goes to hit the sledgehammer. He gets it kicked in his face. Then Flair comes down, looks like he's going to hit Triple H and hits Van Dam instead. Triple H looks mildly surprised. Then goes for his pedigree. Not this way, 1, 2, 3. And then the alliance, and then Flair and Triple H hug it out. And the crowd just felt kind of confused.
Well, everything else was just a mystery.
Yeah, apparently. And that's a good pun. That was well done. And
Thank you. Thank you. I almost thought you went over your head.
Oh no, I got it. I was like, well, I might as well acknowledge it. Well done. The effect was still given, but it just took too long to get there.
Yeah, and again, this is the whole thing this was really the beginning of the Reign of Terror.
Yeah. And this is really how it began, was pretty appropriate, given all things considered.
And it's solidified with the next show and the next feud for Triple H.
Yeah, with which was our good friend Katie Vick and the SpaghettiOs at the funeral home incident. Yeah. When you get a double sigh of exasperation from Skylar and myself, that angle was straight up bad. But
and speaking of bad angles, what the hell was this with the Young and the Restless?
I have no idea. I don't even remember the dude's name. D'Lo, which was great to see, and Kidman are talking, and D'Lo's like, man, that's some shit. And then the Young and the Restless guy comes up and murmurs his lines. And is like...
he's trying to look like a badass and just... doesn't.
He doesn't. And D'Lo's like trying his best to be like, hey man, I'm a fan of daytime soap opera television. Which I don't think he is. D'Lo was probably told who this guy was like 5 minutes before this show started.
Right, and who is this lady that shows up?
Dawn Marie, the I'm gonna fuck Tori Wilson's dad until I kill him. Because SmackDown was not devoid of crap either.
What is it with everyone needing to get hot, sexy women just involved in this shit?
Well, Dawn Marie was a great heel in ECW. She was a complete bastardess, for lack of an actual word. And, there was times when then Dawn Marie was really good, but this was at the time when SmackDown was doing the bikini contests, and Dawn Marie losing the bikini contest to Tori Wilson got her so mad that she went and fucked her dad to death. And it was just very strange. It was a weird time for WWE, and the crowd again was like, what was the point of that? And then
we get the next match.
Then we get the next match where if King wasn't on commentary, I think it would have been so much better. Trish Stratus and Molly Holly, back at the time when women were meant to be or pushed as the piss break match. Which is a shame because I think while this match was sloppy, it was gritty, and I actually enjoyed it.
This was, again, this was the genesis of women being taken seriously with two women who were very, very good wrestlers. And the thing about it is that their ring attire is not super sexy. It's just ring attire. Or even regular attire in Molly Holly's case.
Yeah. And, and fun facts, I believe this was the last time that Trish Stratus ever used this theme. I think...
Didn't she?
Going forward...
I think she debuted after.
Going forward, she got the new one. You know, go, it's time to rock and roll, you know, all that stuff. That came, I think, like, the Raw after this show.
To be fair, rock and roll is a pretty cool theme for
It is a good,
Stratus.
it is. Trish Stratus, I mean, apart from maybe Lita, has one of the most recognizable women's themes of this era.
That, and I think we've all recognized that. I think Trish Stratus is probably the greatest female wrestler of all time.
Yeah, who doesn't have the reputation like Moolah does?
Exactly.
You know? So,
and it was proven in this match too. Like, I know Molly Holly is very good, and she was very solid in this match. But I would kind of akin Molly Holly to be like Bayley, in that she's the very solid hand, but she's not the draw.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. I do have to say though, proper bitch Molly Holly is peak Molly Holly.
Oh yes.
This was my favorite era of Molly Holly was in this time frame, because she was great. You know, better than the Mighty Molly gimmick. I never cared for that.
No.
And better than bald Molly Holly, who lost the hair match, but that still kind of made her look a bit badass. This was and better than when she wasn't in the right to censor, but definitely kind of fell under that ilk.
Right, but this is the whole thing. That Molly Holly, she was very vicious in this match. Like, she was doing a lot of ferocity that you would not expect from women's wrestlers at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, she even did the Triple H stair bump.
Yeah, she was laying it in a lot of it too, you know. They weren't given a whole lot of time here, but boy did they maximize on the time they did have.
I mean, they were given 6 minutes. It's not great, but you can do something with it.
Yeah, oh absolutely. Did we get a collar and elbow tie-up?
No.
Yes, we did.
Did we get the collar?
Yes, we did. 4 out of 6. It wasn't long, but we got one.
Okay, that's fair.
And that still counts. Then the people didn't really care until Molly got hit into the steel steps, and that woke people up.
Yep.
And then Jerry.
By the way, the straight jacket by Molly Holly on Trish Stratus is very, very good.
Yeah, that was actually really cool. I had never really seen the kind of sequence like that. And it looked painful. And was this the most like clean and crisp match as far, you know, it was a little sloppy, but it felt like a struggle because of the intensity of the women involved.
Exactly, especially for Molly Holly, who had her game face on in this match.
Yeah. But Jerry. I
listened to this match on quiet on mute because I knew Jerry was going to be a problem.
It's one thing for you to do the woohoo and the puppies and all that during the HLA segments and during seeing the women in Bischoff's office. It's quite another to do that when these two women are trying to be serious and be selling a serious matchup for a title. And then for you to be like, I want to show her my breaststroke and virginity can be cured and all that shit. It's like, not now, Jerry. Save it for the floozies, not for the women's wrestlers.
Exactly.
You know, that's where I don't think he ever knew where to draw the line.
Exactly. And listening to it now, it is so cringe.
Yeah. And, yeah.
It's the drunk uncle who's way older than these ladies talking about their bodies. I'm just like, come on. They're putting their bodies out there. They're fighting.
Yeah. And JR tried to keep it reined in, you know, but, you know, one of the great things, speaking of intensity, the drop toe hold to the choke on the rope.
Oh, that was very good.
These ladies were not pulling punches. These were really intense spots that got crowd reaction.
Like Molly Holly countering Stratisfaction into the Tree of Woe into the Molly elbow.
Yeah, that handspring elbow, that was great. And then I felt bad for JR because King said something about puppies, and JR, I think she hit an elbow into the breast, and JR was like, that'll bruise a pup. I'm like,
I think it was insulting Jerry too.
Yeah, it was like, well, because to JR's credit, he had to kind of just like accept some of that for what it was, you know, and I feel for him in that respect. You know, he couldn't just always be Gorilla Monsoon going, will you stop? But he would do that a lot.
By the way, this finish, is very much coming out of nowhere.
It did, but at the same time, it was one of the few times where it showing up out of nowhere worked really well.
I mean, it's not an RKO out of nowhere.
Because they did the count, you know, it was the... Rey Mysterio does this counter all the time, right? Where they go to land something, they puts the hands down and counters it into the Bulldog, and suddenly the crowd got into it, and the cover, 1, 2, 3, huge pop, Trish becomes the world champion, gives a small babyface promo afterwards. It was good. It was good. It was just Jerry that was the problem.
Oh, yeah. For sure. And thankfully, he didn't have anything else to do. Well, exactly. We get all this bullshit with Jerry, and then we go backstage to all the women with Jamal, Rosey, Rico, and Eric Bischoff.
Yeah. Did you see Rico goes for the fist pump and Bischoff doesn't give it to him?
Exactly.
Yeah. Jamal gets a fist pump. Rico gets the fist pump. He holds it up there for a second. He's like, oh, no, I guess not. And then Rico, who's supposed to be gay, goes and gets laid with all the lesbians.
No, it wasn't that he was gay. It's just that he has this, like, suave Caribbean style.
An effeminate touch. Let's put it that way. And
I mean, hey, gay women love effeminate touches.
I can't dispute that. I cannot dispute that. I wouldn't know.
By the way, do me a favor. Check all the women and count how many of them have had breast surgeries. Oh, wait, that's all of them.
Yeah, well, that's... For the most part, I would say that's probably true. Now, let me ask you this. What's more insulting? Jerry the King Lawler saying all this stuff about puppies and breaststroke, or Taz calling women tomatoes? What does that even mean?
Both.
What does that even mean? I don't
You know what it means.
But what is the tomato referencing? That they're plump? That what comes out of them is the same color as tomatoes? I don't understand. I don't understand.
Juicy.
Yeah, well, apparently.
Juicy.
Voluptuous, in fact. But then we get a match I forgot was even on this card, and I feel offended at myself for forgetting that this match was on the card, because good God, this match was spectacular. As it always is with these two.
I mean, I hate to say it, but there is the elephant that's in the room.
Yeah, but we could all, at this point, if you just leave it alone, we all know it. We all are aware of it. I'm at this point, I was in it for the matchup.
Exactly. It's like, the reason why we forget about Chris Benoit's matches is because of the elephants. But if you leave the elephant outside of the room and just focus on him wrestling, it's fantastic.
Yeah. It's Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit. Now, the story of this was that in a 6-man tag, Angle got a stink face, and Benoit laughed at Angle, so Angle got pissed. And then there was another matchup shortly thereafter where Angle screwed over Benoit so that Benoit got a stink face and Angle laughed. So finally it became oh, you think you're better than me? Prove it. Prove it. And so we've got a heel versus heel match, and you wouldn't know it by the reactions of the crowd because these two are just so damn good.
Exactly. But also, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Rikishi is terrible.
Post-Attitude Era Rikishi is terrible.
Exactly.
But we'll get to him. We will get to him. Another big plus.
The stupid storyline involved. This match was fantastic and easily the best match of the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're looking for the best technical wrestling matchup of the show, this is it. You know.
And it's two shooters wrestling.
Yeah. And I love this. It's like, my favorite part about this, the entrances total took 2 minutes. Get in, get your shit in, and get in the ring. We got a matchup to do.
Well, again, it's the whole intensity thing. These guys were angry at each other, and they wrestled like it. That collar and elbow tie-up, the referee had to separate them because the collar and elbow tie-up was too intense.
Yeah. Presentation is key. And sometimes it's the small stuff like cutting down the entrance length instead of a 6-minute Roman Reigns entrance. Or a 45-minute Dead Man Undertaker entrance, for those of you who, the originator of long entrances.
Or the Triple H entrance.
Or the Triple H entrance, same deal. There's some people who can get away with that. But when it's everybody getting that, it's too much. These guys, it was get in, let's get to wrestling. You already mentioned it, Sky. We got a collar and elbow tie-up. We are 5 for 7. 5 for 7, folks. This is why I started adding the collar and elbow tie-up counter to Modern Wrestling. Because what's the most recent one we've had? Like 4 for 9 on an AEW show?
3 for 16.
Yeah.
3 for 16 for 2 nights of WrestleMania.
Yeah. And we have more in this show alone. We're going to double that number come the main event. We're going to double the number of collar and elbow tie-ups on this show alone than 2 nights of WrestleMania.
Right. But again, focusing on this match specifically, a lot of shooter catch-can wrestling style.
Yep.
And a lot of amateur wrestling style. Like Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit size each other up. Kurt Angle goes lows and picks the leg.
Yep. And this was after they did a collar and elbow tie-up double dump on the outside, which I don't think I've ever seen before.
I mean, it's been done. I mean, Goldberg and DDP did it in their match.
True. But it didn't look the way that this did.
No.
It didn't look anywhere the way that this did. And
now, we all know Kurt Angle has his wrestling background, obviously. Chris Benoit wrestling from the Heart Dungeon, right?
Yep. And then Japan
Boy.
as Pegasus Kid.
Man, those Heart Dungeon graduates.
Yeah. It's a shame that Tyson Kidd got the injury he did. Otherwise, we'd probably look at him more fondly in that respect.
Well, he was the last graduate of the Heart Dungeon, but he was also the smallest, so.
Well, yeah, but that was a sign of the times, too. But in any case, yep. I loved the snapmare, and Kurt Angle doesn't release the hammerlock he's got on Benoit. He followed that all the way through. And we get a second double bridge, but this is such a different, fast, technical pace. You don't feel like anything is being overused.
Exactly.
At all. The leg scissors bear hug. Everything they do is just so seamless. They always had good chemistry together.
And not only is it the chemistry, but it's also just the timing, the different ways that they know how each other moves. Again, the SmackDown 6 era had maybe the best group of wrestlers.
Yeah. And it showed here. And we mentioned it before. I wrote down on my notes, Taz is great at move analytics because he adds legitimacy to everything that's done.
Right. This was the most important match for Taz to be on, and he was on.
Yeah. And he was on all night. He and Cole were tremendous all night. But they also had a lot better matches to work with than JR and King.
Exactly.
But that's not necessarily JR and King's fault. It's just what was going on at the time. And none of those matches were bad. They were all still good compared to what we get dealt with today.
It's just that the quality was different because, again, Paul Heyman was smart when he was picking his roster.
Yeah. And that makes it makes the difference. And then we get into the German suplexes. And that was when these two were the only two doing them instead of everybody doing them or it being Brock's only move.
Exactly. And not only was it that these two were the only ones doing their German suplexes, but these Germans.
Damn.
Oh, each one was hard impact. And It was not the gratuitous Three Amigo thing. No, it definitely... It didn't feel like, okay, well, we're going to see all three, and, it's like we're all anticipating this. It wasn't like that. Because they all looked deadly, and they all were sold brilliantly, and I always love when Kurt took that German suplex and did the flip all the way up and over and landed on his stomach, and then sold it like a dead body. He did that a few times in these matches, and in matches with Benoit, and they always looked tremendous. Exactly. It's just, when you're this over and you're this good,
this is one of the few times you can get away with a heel versus heel match when you've got guys who are this good doing this.
Well, the thing is that they were heels, but they were still getting pops. Like when Angle had the straps go down, everybody was getting excited because they knew what was coming.
And you know what's funny about this is that these two, this was really the start of both of them turning babyface before the year was out.
Yep.
Because they're just so damn good. This was what it was.
Also, that released German suplex by Chris Benoit. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That release one where Kurt did the giant over, like the up and over. Oh, that always looks great. It always looks great when these two did it. It was wonderful. Then they do this like, it almost looks like they're going to do a tombstone, but then...
No. Chris Benoit goes up to the top rope to set up for the flying headbutt. Kurt Angle does the Shelton Benjamin run up to the top rope and then belly to belly from the top rope.
You mean Kurt Angle does the Kurt Angle run up to the top rope, belly to belly off the top rope that Shelton Benjamin took from Kurt Angle during Team Angle? Yes.
Yeah.
He sure did.
And then they do the teases of the, as you said, the
tombstone.
Which were the shoulder breakers.
Right, but they turned it into a Scott Norton shoulder breaker, and I always love a good shoulder breaker. We never see them nowadays. Although we did just recently. Somebody just did a shoulder breaker. Might have been AJ? I can't remember who it was.
I think it was Edge and AJ during WrestleMania.
Yeah, and I popped for it then, and I'll pop for it now. I always like a good shoulder breaker, because they never happen.
Yeah, well, it's because they look too much like the tombstone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure Taker told them don't do the tombstone.
Well, not that he did one in this matchup, but still.
I know because of the elephant in the room is going to come back in for a second.
Yeah.
I cringe whenever I see the flying headbutt.
Me too. I wrote it down too. I'm like, I know it's one of his moves that got the biggest pop, but yeah. Yeah.
I'm also so glad that Bryan Danielson stopped doing it.
Me too. And then they go into this huge exchange of the crossface into the ankle lock, into the crossface, into the ankle lock, into Angle doing the crossface, into Benoit hitting the ankle lock. I loved when Benoit had the crossface and Angle countered it by grabbing Benoit's foot and wrenching it into the ankle lock while he had the crossface on.
It's what you do with two great submission experts.
Yeah, and it was just... But then both guys cheated because Kurt tried to, I think it was like a thumb to the eye or whatever it was, and then...
No. What was is that he had Chris Benoit on the crossface. Benoit tries to grab for the rope, and Kurt Angle
uses the
his
foot
to push the rope away.
Yeah.
Chris Benoit turns it over, pins Kurt Angle with his feet on the ropes.
Yeah. So they both cheated because they're both heels, but nobody gave a fuck because these guys are so incredibly good.
Exactly.
That it was basically just a standing ovation like, God, we love you too. These are the two that the crowd could say fight forever and I'd be in for it.
Also, Kurt Angle losing his shit at the end of this match is always funny.
Yeah, Kurt Angle is the best temper tantrum thrower of anyone in pro wrestling. He was just terrific at it. Just an A+ match. Anytime these two were in the ring, it was quality. But this was also after they had quite a few matches in the Attitude Era. So this was them coming together at a very different time in their careers. Might have been their last one on... No. They had another one.
No, this was not their last one.
They had another one. I've almost said that this was their last one, but no, they definitely had at least one more. But still.
And again, it's the whole thing of, the SmackDown 6. These guys kept wrestling for each other. They wrestled in that tag team tournament when Los Guerreros went head-to-head with... I can't remember who it was. Hang on, give me 1 second. Let me research this properly.
Yes, this is a Skylar informational moment.
They became a tag team after this and won the tag team titles.
Yeah, they're the first to win the SmackDown tag team titles, or the second, because I think Edge and Mysterio won it shortly thereafter.
No, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle beat Los Guerreros in the semifinals, then beat Edge and Ray in the finals to become the inaugural champions.
That's right. Because they were like, you know what? We're so good. Let's just be the best. And they were. And they were. And this match was just tremendous. Chef kiss.
Now, hold on. Do you want to listen to this 8-team tournaments?
Yeah, lay it on me.
So, quarterfinals. Los Guerreros beat Mark Henry and Rikishi.
Right. That makes sense.
Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit beat Billy Kidman and John Cena.
That's a team.
Reverend Devon and Ron Simmons beat Billy and Chuck. This was the match that Billy Gunn got that separated shoulder injury.
Right.
Edge and Rey Mysterio defeat Tajiri and Brock Lesnar?
Yeah, that was a kind of a weird pairing. But that was more of a setup for what they were doing later on anyway with him and Taker, so...
Like, really, Brock Lesnar and Tajiri were tag team partners at one point.
Yep. Then, yeah, that was a match that happened. It definitely was a match that happened. And then Tajiri would go on to have a good feud with Jamie Noble.
And speaking of things that happened...
Well, before we get to that, we get a backstage promo with Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar and some anonymous guy interviewer. And Paul Heyman is the fucking master. Even in 2002, this guy just knew exactly how to sell Brock Lesnar.
Well, again, there are different versions of Paul Heyman that have existed.
Yeah, he's so damn good. And I did like the part where Brock Lesnar starts to talk, and this announcer just like slowly starts backing up like, this dude is fucking big. It was
just a little bit.
But selling the intimidation. Again, it's the little things like that are just, that's what made Brock Lesnar, and that's what really truly made Brock Lesnar what he was.
Exactly. Like, the whole time you look at Brock Lesnar's eyes, you see that monster that breaks people.
Yeah. And the only thing that's changed is that he's got a sword on his chest and he does a lot fewer moves.
Yep.
But...
So, one more thing. Brock Lesnar using Unforgiven at the end of that promo.
Yeah.
I cringed a little bit, but Brock Lesnar can get away with it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm sure that line was probably fed to him. But Brock Lesnar eats a lot, so I'm not going to knock it.
Buy the Brock Lesnar blends of beefs and spices.
Yes, I'm going to have to I got to try that. I got to see what that's all about, man. It's just, I don't know if I need a 4-gallon tub, but I will buy a shaker's worth and let you know how that goes. But we are here, and I will try to move through this as quickly as possible so we can get on to the main event. It's time for HLA, and this segment went so long that even the fans didn't give a crap by the end of it.
It's because Eric Bischoff was talking way too much.
Eric was talking way too much. This whole thing just took way too long. So, here are the lesbians that come out, quote-unquote lesbians, that...
Out of curiosity, which one do you think was hotter?
Both of them. I like them both.
You say that. Normally, I'm a blonde person, but I think I like the brunette a little bit more.
Yeah. What were their names? Peaches and Cream?
Probably.
No, that's what he said. That's what he said. But anyway, what I did not like was Fink having to say, accompanied by the lesbians, Eric Bischoff. I'm like, oh.
You know Eric Bischoff would probably make Fink say that.
I know, but like, come on. But anyway, they go,
then they simulate action.
This was cringe. Well, they almost simulate action. JR did a little woohoo. And then, I have to say, not giving LA HLA did get heat. Because every time Eric broke it up, he'd be like, wait, hold on. I've changed my mind. It always got booed. Then, and then, finally, they're like, I don't want these hot ladies for you, Stephanie. I want the biggest, ugliest, fattest lesbo I could find. And King goes,
well, they do the tease of the whole HLA thing with Stephanie, with the two hot girls like
taking the jackets off. Yep.
They take their clothes off and
not all of them, just their jackets. You know, not enough.
Tops.
But then he does the, oh wait, I've changed my mind. I want this to be humiliating. I brought the ugliest, fattest lesbo, and King said, not Rosey, and I went, close. But not quite. Because out comes
a big old black lady.
It's Rikishi, who is very clearly Rikishi. Yeah, it was very clearly Rikishi, but he's dressed up in drag to Big Dick Johnson's theme song. And Rikishi comes, you know, they come in and he's looking all sassy. Now, let me ask you something, Sky. If a Samoan dresses up in blackface, is it still racist? You be the judge, ladies and gentlemen. Just saying. These are the questions that you don't have to ask because wrestling isn't real.
I hate you so much.
Well, don't hate me. Hate them. They're the ones who did this.
I wanted to listen to this on silent, and you said, no, you have to listen to the audio.
Yeah, see,
it's not enough to watch it. You have to hear Jerry the King Lawler masturbate to this bullshit.
Yes, and boy was he. And this was like, King was so insufferable through this whole thing. He really was. And then Big Quiche comes in. Stephanie plants a giant one on him to the point where like the makeup was all on her face. Bischoff's like, what the hell? Standing sidekick. And then when the blonde hair comes out and everybody realizes it's Rikishi, that got a pop. We get a stink face. We get the stink face. The crowd's like, okay, that was funny, but we really wanted to see women making out. So like that was a bit deflating, you know. and then JR's like, oh my God. King's like, this is awful. They cut to the SmackDown commentary team doing the fakest laugh I've ever heard in my life. They're like, oh, I hadn't laughed that hard in years. That was a knee slapper. And well, but anyway, here's our main event.
Again, Rikishi's the worst.
I wish this show did not center so much around the HLA bit. Because the wrestling on this show was better than that. It deserved better than HLA being the framework. You know? Especially considering how good this main event was, you know, even leading up to the finish, which we'll talk about in a minute. It is Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker.
Biker Taker.
And it's Biker Taker, but it's still Undertaker. And this was the best Biker Taker, best version of Biker Taker. He was fine at the Attitude Era. That was okay. Didn't, you know, to Limp Bizkit's rolling. He was good as a heel in the beginning of 2002, forcing Tommy Dreamer to drink his tobacco spit. But this Vengeance Babyface Taker was peak Biker Taker.
Dead man walking.
Yeah. And this is the first time that song had been used. With the actual lyrics to it, was on this show. And I loved the package. The hype package for this still gives me chills.
Well, yeah, except the whole thing with Sarah was just
But I think it's the song, honestly. More than anything else, it's Gavin Rossdale's Adrenaline. That song is just so damn good. You could have put that on top of a guy selling ice cream to a toddler and you'd get amped up for this match. I still liked it. And that might be nostalgia talking for me, but I still love the package. And here comes Biker Taker. The theme is still badass. Did you notice we had no title intros tonight?
No, they had the intros on the way to the ring.
Exactly. That's where you put them. don't waste more time than you have to getting everybody into the corner and being, the following contest is for my asshole, and doing all that. I hate that. I've always hated that because it works so much better like this.
I mean, I would only do it for the main event, but I agree with you.
It's, speaking of first times, this is the first time that Taz ever coined the phrase, "Here comes the pain," in reference to Brock Lesnar.
A lot of first on this show.
Yeah. Which is also, I think, a big part of it, because this pay-per-view had a long ripple effect on WWE's programming.
Right. And part of that was because this was the pay-per-view after SummerSlam, and Brock Lesnar famously beat The Rock in the main event for the WWE title.
Yeah. Plus, on top of that, this was also when they froze the rosters, so there were no trades going back and forth either. So this was kind of like, these are our rosters, here's what they are, now get ready, because we're moving on.
Big-time players, and we're talking big-time players.
Yeah, and the crowd was white hot for this. Before they even locked up, the crowd was white hot for this.
Right. Again, these guys know how to sell a match. Undertaker, no bike. He's serious. He's angry.
Yeah.
Brock Lesnar comes out, always intense.
Yeah. Did we get a collar and elbow tie-up in this match?
Yes, we did.
We sure did. Which means our total for tonight was 6 out of 8.
Right. And of those 6 matches, all of them that got the collar and elbow tie-up, the 2 matches that didn't were both hot starts, so you can argue they didn't need it.
And were justified in it. I almost would have said that this match would have been fine with a hot start too, considering what Undertaker, considering the feud that they had, but they still knew that because this was Brock's biggest test up to date, matchup wise, after beating Flair and after beating Van Dam and beating up the Hardys 1,000 times and beating Edge and
here's the thing. They did the collar and elbow tie, but the first thing they do is go nose to nose, literally.
Right. And that got a pop. That alone got a pop. And then we get some wrestling.
Brock Lesnar goes up to Undertaker, nose to nose. Undertaker shoves him off, and then they do the collar and elbow tie-up.
Yeah. And this point, when Brock had never been manhandled.
They did not do a collar and elbow tie-up.
Yeah. They did a couple of them. But then the big moment when Brock had never really been manhandled like this, and Taker shoves Lesnar out of the ring, and everybody's like, oh my God. And Lesnar immediately starts freaking the fuck out because he's never been manhandled like this. Everything else has been a cinch. Immediately, the tone of this Lesnar match versus everything that the people had seen up to this point made this feel more important.
Well, that's because, again, of all the guys on the roster in 2002 WWE that can manhandle Brock Lesnar, it would be Undertaker.
Yeah, absolutely. And do I really miss the guy who did more than 3 moves, Lesnar.
I know. I'm tired of 2012 post Brock Lesnar because I'm tired of seeing the Germans, Kimura, F5, Bob's your uncle. This Brock Lesnar was chain wrestling.
Yeah. There was so much more to this Brock Lesnar than there was. And now, don't get me wrong. In certain circumstances, like when Brock dominated John Cena, 16 German suplexes made sense. There was a time for it. But then we haven't seen that change for 7 years since.
Exactly. I know the match with Bobby Lashley was a dream match, but imagine if Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley did chain wrestling instead of just trade Germans.
Imagine how the tone of Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar would have been if this Brock Lesnar fought Roman Reigns at this year's Mania, rather than doing the match we've seen 17 times already.
Exactly. Again, Brock Lesnar gets angry about the fact that he's being manhandled by Undertaker. He kicks the steel steps, and the steps go a good distance. Paul Heyman is scared.
Good distance.
Because Paul Heyman is scared that he can't control Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. And then we get the attacks on the ribs. The bags on the bad ribs. We get the bow and arrow to the ring post. The power slam. The power slam. Brock had so many tools here. And there's one thing. If Brock wanted to do everything that he's already done You know, in these if recent Brock Lesnar added one move to his arsenal, the one move I want him to add is the bear hug.
Because he got so much out of the bear hug.
Yeah. And another thing I didn't mention until up to this point, everybody's punches look pretty solid tonight.
Yes, but I think Undertaker's punches were the best.
Well, because he's the best pure striker in professional wrestling. Michael Cole.
He is.
He is. But then when every time we ever saw The Undertaker ever after that, Michael Cole had to say it. You know, that became a Coleism. And
fair enough.
But not to say he's not, because he's a hell of a striker. And that was where I mentioned it. I saw Taker's punch, and I'm like, you know what? There was nobody whose punches looked bad on this show. Not that I noticed, at least.
The only one that you could maybe even say... Actually, I can't even really say about Ric Flair either, because he did knife-edge chops.
Yeah, and Van Dam was doing forearms, but he was the only one who was doing forearms. So...
But it works for Van Dam's style.
Right, exactly. And, yeah, instead of everybody doing forearms. Then we get... Lesnar hits Taker with the belt. Taker gets juice. Lesnar is taken over. Looks like maybe this will be another Brock Lesnar match where he gets the advantage and takes over another veteran. But that's not what happened on this matchup.
That's not what happens on this day.
Yeah. And the juice, nobody got juice up to this point, even though Edge could have with the turnbuckle, because it was
RVD
meant for
got
here.
A little bit from the elbow, but it wasn't the juice from the forehead.
No. And that was more accidental hard way as opposed to getting juice.
Right.
You know? And again, then we kind of got where I had the issue with Triple H and Van Dam with the ref bump. Because we get the ref bump here, and not for nothing, 2 ref bumps in both world title matches is a little lazy.
Yeah.
It's a little lazy. I don't want to say it's majorly lazy, but it's a little lazy. But at least in the defense of this one, Brian Hebner got right back up, and it was in a reasonable amount of time. He was like, "Oh snap, I'm messed up, but I'm all right. All right, here we go. All right, let's go." And he got back up, and the match continued on. It was just enough time for Matt Hardy to get a last ride.
The other thing, too, though, was that this ref bump was better because the first one kind of looked like Earl Hebner was setting up to be in position to be hit. Yeah. This one was better.
None of them really in this matchup looked like Brian Hebner was trying to get set up for it. You know, that was, I think, one of the big pluses. Plus, the ref bumps in this matchup were necessary for why I think the finish worked, which we'll talk about in a minute. Especially...
Can we talk about it real quickly? Can we talk about Matt Hardy's shirt?
Matt Hardy version 1. It was a weird...
No,
it was...
Matt Hardy stole Rico's shirt and took his gimmick for a second.
Yeah, well, Matt Hardy's known to have tight shirts. Tight, flamboyant shirts. Remember when he was teaming up when Michael Hayes was managing them and they all had those weird shirts?
Yep.
So that's in line for Matt. But they mentioned Matt Hardy's on Heyman's payroll. And Matt Hardy did fuck all of nothing before he got beaten up, but it was enough for Lesnar to take back advantage.
Right. Brian Hebner gets up, does the count, gets knocked down again.
Yep. And again, this was necessary for the finish. But this was where I was like, man, I really wish that Hunter and Rob had found a different means.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like, it made sense for this match. It was just a tool for the other match. It was just because they needed a referee not to see it.
Right,
as opposed, yeah.
That first chair shot.
Damn. I mean, it's a gimmicked chair, but still.
I mean, the way it bent, the way it sounded.
The shape of that chair when Taker was done. My God.
By the way, I'm pretty sure during this time, Brock Lesnar was getting his juice, and he was having issues with it.
Yeah.
Undertaker and Paul Heyman had to improvise.
Yeah, and that was the lightest fucking juice I'd ever seen. That was a trickle at most from Brock, but But it was probably his first time ever getting it, so...
As Jim Cornette would say, a pap smear.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't the best juice, but it's still juice, damn it. The crowd was on fire. They get back up. You know, they're still going back and forth. And then just eventually, Hebner gets squished into the turnbuckle. And this is why I didn't hate the ref bumps here, because in the context of what they're telling, it was that these two behemoths are too big to be confined by the rules and by the referee. He's in the way, not because, you know, he's supposed to be hit. It's just these guys are out of control. As opposed to Earl Hebner standing there to be hit so he could be down so that the other stuff can be done.
Exactly. And then they go through the finishing sequence of this matches, and they tease the finishers. I don't think Brock Lesnar ever hit the F5.
He did not. Brock didn't hit the F5. Taker hit a chokeslam, but only after Hebner had called for the bell. Like, this is getting out of control. I've been hit 3 times. Like, this is enough. You know,
right, and him trying to separate the two of them from fighting each other so they can have a little bit of order, and them ignoring them. Brock Lesnar pushing Brian Hebner into the turnbuckle and threatening him.
Yeah, and then he gets squished, and then Hebner has enough. This is one of those rare times when a double disqualification makes sense for what they're trying to say.
Fans are so pissed, though. Apparently, I took notes from WWE about pissing off Los Angeles.
Yeah, LA has been screwed over in the professional wrestling world for some time. It's been 20 years of that, Sky, so it's not just you.
But again, the WWE SmackDown referees get involved, and they try to stop it, and Brock Lesnar starts throwing them away.
Yep. And so does Taker. Then we get a choke slam. Then they try to separate them more. And then finally, Lesnar, you know, Heyman's like, let's go. You've got the belt. Let's get out of here. And Taker's like, nah, I'm not done. And Lesnar's like, you know what? No, I'm not done. So then they push all the referees aside and they go punch for punch. And punch for punch will always beat the look of a hockey fight.
Exactly. And then Taker follows up with his knees, and to end the show, throws Brock Lesnar through the sign.
And that's how the show goes off the air. Oh, it was exciting. Because you wanted to know what was going to happen after that. Was Brock going to get up? Were these two ever going to stop fighting each other? You don't know. You got to watch next time on SmackDown to see what the hell happened.
And obviously how they're going to continue this. And the way they continued it was the Hell in a Cell match at No Mercy.
Yeah, because the footage was shortly thereafter. You know, what they showed on SmackDown was that night, after that had happened, that they kept fighting. Matt Hardy sabotaged Taker in the background. And then when Taker, you know, finally get there, Lesnar comes back in, hits an F5 on Taker. When Taker's holding up on this cage structure, he takes a fire extinguisher and smashes Taker's hand and breaks his hand. And then they go into the Hell in a Cell announcement the next week, which leads to their tremendous Hell in a Cell match that they have at No Mercy. LA didn't like the finish, but that was the point. And I really liked this main event. It's a double DQ, yes. Was it what the fans wanted? Probably not. But did it do exactly what they were trying to do with it? Absolutely.
Exactly.
And man, it was what a show. It was just a tremendous show. I mean, listen, before we get into the ratings here, I understand that all of the HLA stuff, that whole framework, I wish wasn't on this show because the matches deserved so much better than that. But these matches, you're hard pressed. If you substituted any of the matches that were on this show and put them on a 2022 show, chances are they'd be one of the best matches on the show.
Easily, without a doubt.
Yeah. Any of them. Any one of them. Even Rosey and Jamal and Billy and Chuck.
Let's not go that far.
Well, I'm sorry, a 20-minute spot fest of moves that we see all the time. I would rather see a basic-ass match that goes 6 minutes. If it didn't have the stipulation, if it was just a pure tag team match, I would take that over a lot of the matches that have 2 comebacks and 2 devolves and then has 6 double team finishers and a pin.
Okay, fair enough.
I would take a basic ass 5-minute match that looks like it should be in a training school, which it really did, over just
Ohio
moves.
Valley Wrestling.
Yeah, over just moves. And I will always stand by that statement, and I'm not necessarily trying to single out New Day and the Usos, but that's what they became for a very long time. And it's just, the times are different. So call me an old school curmudgeon if you must.
We should probably get to ratings for this show.
Well, Sky, I'm going to let you go first. Because I said at the beginning that you will probably rank this show less than I will. But I am also highly nostalgia-driven. But I want to hear your thoughts now that we've reached the end.
Again, this was a fun show to watch. There was a lot of good stuff in it. And it's the stuff that we wish WWE would do now that they don't do. And we will continue to point this out as we continue on in this exploration of past shows.
Yes.
Given in mind that there are still things that pissed me off and still things that really annoyed me.
Yeah.
And they constituted mainly the HLA angle, which...
yeah, I'm with you.
I will personally find Vince Russo and stab him to death because of that. Even though I know he's not there, he's the one that comes up with this shit.
Yeah, well, Katie Vick more than made up for HLA. So if you thought it was bad now, give it a month.
Right. I would give this show maybe an 8, maybe a 9, but the HLA angle really took it off. I'm still happy about the show for the most part, so I'm going to give it a 7. But if HLA had not been there, this would have been an 8, almost a 9.
Yeah. And I have to agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's the HLA part of this really does bring the show down. And even in the crowd reaction, it brought the show down. You could hear it in Los Angeles that they were way more invested in the matches than they were that angle in all aspects. And this is one of those things. This was the start of WWE doing this kind of stuff and it not panning out, not panning out for them. And that's kind of where this led. But top to bottom, there was not a match on this card that I could say was complete and utter dog shit or was an insult to wrestling. The overall tone of intensity on this show is way more palpable than it's been in modern wrestling anywhere in a decade. With the exception of a handful of matches, right? You have to kind of cherry pick in modern wrestling what gets this level of intensity. But this was across the board intensity, something so different. It felt different. It felt energizing. It felt exciting. You wanted to see what was happening next after this. And I have to just say, you did grade it a little lower, but not much lower. Because because this was my favorite pay-per-view of all time. The HLA stuff does take points away. But the rest of it more than makes up for it. I gave it an 8. And because there's just so much enjoyment that you can get, even from the matches that aren't the ones that mean the most on the card. There's stuff to take away here that you could really, really sink your teeth into and really explore where you want to go, how you want to do it, and the way you want to do it. This is the way that this is why it's so heartbreaking to me, Sky, that WWE has lost their way this hard when they had a show like this.
And just think about this for a second. Unforgiven was a B pay-per-view.
Exactly. This was a setup show, and it got a 7 and an 8, respectively. WrestleMania 38 Sunday got a 0 out of 30. This got a 15 out of 20. So, that's where we're at, folks. But this has been a lot of fun. Skylar, I cannot wait to see what show you have in store for us. What we're going to do with these, folks, is we're going to do these the week after we do ACPW and NWL. So we're going to do our fantasy booking, then we're going to watch an old show from the annals of time, and we will go from there. So until then, it is time to take our first commercial break. Next week, next Monday night, we've got a brand new show, brand new news of the week, brand new match of the week, brand new superstar spotlight. It's all coming to you. And you know, Sky, how the fans can get involved?
How can they get involved, my man?
Because they can like, they can share, they can subscribe, and they can hit that bell button to all so that every time they see a Court-Martail podcast post, live stream or no, they will be able to see it immediately and join right on and be a part of the fastest growing wrestling podcast in the entirety of the internet. And Sky, I'm happy you and I were able to be a part of this, and thank you for indulging me on this pay-per-view.
Of course, and we will move on to our next show right after this commercial break.